What's going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time. Once again, I'm your host, Simon Samano. And after a week off, we are back. And look who we got with me this week. It is none other than the media titan himself, Mike Bohn. Mike, what's good, man? How you doing?
I'm great, man. We're getting ready for this huge UFC 314 fight week. So many storylines. This is, I think, the best, what we're getting from the sport right now. So if you're not excited for this, I mean, maybe question your MMA fandom at this stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. UFC 314 coming up this weekend in Miami. Gonna be exciting. We're gonna talk about that. And we're gonna talk about some other things. You ready to get this thing going?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, Kamikaze, you know what time it is. Hit it.
I mean, guys, what are you fucking? Is this tonight's stupid question night? Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid. Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, Mike, we're definitely going to jump into UFC 314. But before we do, let's start from this past weekend. All right, this past Saturday, another scintillating UFC Apex show. All right, UFC on ESPN 65, where in the main event, we had Lerone Murphy fighting Josh Emmett. Lerone Murphy came through with the victory with by unanimous decision, 249-46 scores and a 48-47. Another decision for Lerone Murphy, a guy who I believe is 8-0 or 9-0 in the UFC. He's got the one draw on a great winning streak, and he's undefeated overall. But, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this, man. Lerone Murphy still has a long ways to go before he can challenge for the UFC featherweight title.
Yeah, that's not an overreaction. This was his opportunity 1 week before the vacant title fight at UFC 314. Like, he knew it. He said going in, like, I want to make my statement, and it just didn't really happen. I mean, Josh Emmett, all credit, like, very tough guy, hard to finish, all those sort of things. But even within the fight, there wasn't any like really big moments, nothing that's going to go on the highlight reel. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit today. I'm sure a few others will, recount the aftermath, but then we're moving right on from this one. So he didn't put that lasting memory in our mind. And yeah, I mean, you look at where he's at right now, 9-fight unbeaten streak in the UFC. It feels like there's a few more to go here, especially as this division evolves. I mean, you hear both Volkanovski and Diego Lopez saying, Movsar Evloev is of interest for their first title defense. You got Patricio Pitbull debuting against Yair Rodriguez, and then, the likes of Bryce Mitchell versus Jean Silva. So all these guys feel like they have a little more momentum than Lerone Murphy. So I see a lot of people in the aftermath being like, he's kind of like the featherweight Leon Edwards a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
both
Yep.
in terms of style and personality and things like that. And it also feels like he might get that slow climb to the top. So yeah, I mean, winning, of course, always solves everything. People compare him to the likes of, Merab and Leon and Bilal. All these guys did get their title shots. They became champions. So I guess you just got to keep your nose to the grindstone. But this did not make people be like, hey, I want to see Leon or Lerone Murphy fighting the winner of this title fight coming up. So
Yeah, man. Did I read that correctly afterwards in the post-fight press conference? Did Lerone Murphy call his win over Josh Emmett a masterclass? Did I see that?
He said it was masterful and a masterclass. I mean, I get it. Like, did anyone?
It was dancing on the outside. It was dancing on the outside of the cage, is what it was.
For sure.
And
I mean,
the biggest moment of the fight belonged to Josh Emmett when he lifted him over his head and slammed him.
It's true. And I mean, you saw him in the aftermath. He's tweeting like, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Like, that was kind of my approach. I get it. Like, Josh Emmett's pointing to the ground. You're not standing in the middle and throwing bombs with that guy. We see what he's capable of. He's one of the biggest hitters, arguably the biggest hitter at featherweight. So there is a way you have to fight him with at least some intelligence here. But yeah, this did not rally the troops as far as like the Lerone Murphy supporters and pushing him to the top. So the win is good, but on to the next one, you need to, I guess, change the approach and look for something more definitive, because you're not getting a shot with these type of fights.
And the very last thing I will just touch on with Lerone Murphy here, I say the long ways. I think it could be three. He might need 3 more wins, I think, in order to get a UFC title shot, which probably equates to about 2 years. You think he's still 2 years away from a title shot?
It's so hard to say, just because
that's how I'm defining my long ways, just for the record.
Well, so if Volkanovski becomes the champion and he's claiming I want to be active, 3 title defenses in a year, if like he keeps that schedule and starts blowing through contenders, maybe Murphy's shot comes quicker if he keeps doing his side of things. But if we're getting 2 featherweight title fights a year, that timeline probably is a little accurate. It feels like he's not doing much to kind of put himself at the forefront of that discussion.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, tough situation. It's great to be Lerone Murphy. He's winning, but it also sucks to be Lerone Murphy. So we will see how the next couple years play out with his career. He'll get opportunities. All right, man. Now let's move on to UFC 314. All right, coming up this Saturday in Miami. Mike will be there in Miami covering for MMA Junkie, so you know to keep it locked to the coverage all week long. Mike, I've been excited about this event we've all been excited about this event ever since it got announced. All right. I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this one. We're going to go straight to the top, man. Main and co-main. I'm going to hit you with this one right here, Mike. Of the 4 fighters in the UFC 314 main and co-main events, Paddy Pimblett is under the most pressure.
Ooh, I'm going to say overreaction.
Ooh, okay.
I
know where you're going
look
with
around
this.
those
I know
other
where you're
guys.
going with this too.
Yeah, I feel like Volkanovski has a little bit more on him, and maybe even Michael Chandler too. Honestly, like
No way. Michael Chandler, no
'cause I
way,
think
man.
if
That
he
guy's
loses
playing with
this
house
one,
money.
if he loses this one, it's all over. It feels like in terms of all the stuff. Sure, could he be a guy who still welcomes Conor McGregor back? I don't even want to go down that road of whether that's going to happen, but like. Yeah, if he wants to be in these high profile top 5 fights, like you need to start winning at some point. So like if Paddy loses, I think people will just say, okay, he's who we said he was the whole time. He's not that top 7 or 8 lightweight. And then he goes back and fights these other guys. But yeah, I mean, Chandler and Volkanovski have already kind of hit that upper tier. Paddy hasn't even tasted yet. So to say that era of their career, that portion of their career is all over for a loss, that feels like it weighs a little bit more here. But yeah, I mean, Paddy will get all the comments saying that he's not legit, like we always said, if he loses this fight.
Which is exactly why he's got the most pressure on him, man. I mean, this is his breakthrough moment. This is the breakthrough moment. This is the moment that I called for in the beginning of the year, right?
Yep.
This is the one, dude. I mean, that's why he has the most pressure on him. It's been this slow build to a moment, to a fight, to a very definitive fight that you've got to break through. And this is the one for Paddy. You bring up Chandler, man. I mean, Chandler doesn't have a lot of pressure on him. I mean, that guy, does he even care if he wins? I don't even think he cares if he wins or loses. He's just there to be an entertainer at this point.
I could see that too, but I do think deep down in him, like he wants to be champion. He'll express that. I think he's pulled back a little bit on that talk because he understands the losses of late. But if you tell me he goes in there and knocks out Paddy Pimblett in the first, he's going to be screaming for title fights, for rematches with all these guys. Like I know where his approach is going to be. So
he'll give a great promo for sure.
Yeah, so I feel like if he wants to even have the people who take that bit of him even still seriously, which I don't think there's many, like you got to win this fight. So for Paddy, I just feel like he's never been there. He loses this fight, he can still rebuild. He's young enough, like he can go back on a streak here. Whereas all these other guys, they lose. It feels like a door kind of closing permanently on them.
Yeah, but if Paddy loses, though, man, his star power takes a big hit. I mean, he can't really afford a loss because of that as well. Like, he's not just a fighter in this game. He is a legit star. He's been building himself up as a star. The last victory, the last vision that we have of Paddy Pimblett, right, was him submitting King Green, dude, which was super impressive. But we know Michael Chandler is sort of the next level. And, like, yeah, you can't talk the way Paddy's talked for the past several years, dude, and then get to this point and then fall flat. Like he can't fall flat. I think Paddy's stock could actually rise if he won some sort of, 5-round war as well. I mean, because we haven't seen him. We've seen him in adverse situations, right? Where he's been, on the ground, on his back, but kind of in a he's kind of comfortable there. It seems like he's okay there in that world with guys on top of him. But like, if he's in some sort of stand-up war, I could see Paddy's stock just rising big time if he were to somehow come up with the win in a 5-round war. What do you think?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, all these things we're talking about, him losing Chandler, like it all depends on the fashion as well, right? Like how these fights actually play out. So that's a huge element in this. But yeah, I think like he's got a lot of upside here. We haven't seen him fight someone who has completed things in the sport in the UFC like Michael Chandler has and being in those top level fights. So yeah, if he goes in there and like shows himself in any positive way, even if it is in defeat, I think it does more for him. But if he goes out there and gets, humiliated in the first round with a knockout or something like a Michael Chandler versus Dan Hooker type of fight, then I think that's like his worst case scenario.
All right. And we haven't even touched though. All right. We haven't touched a little bit. So let's touch a little bit on the next UFC featherweight champion, Diego Lopez. See what I did there? See what I did there? You see what I did there? Huh? What do you think? What do you think about Diego coming into this fight? Like, do you just think there's no pressure on him? Is he like playing with house money here? If he loses, can he rebuild, or is he in a spot where he's also, facing a lot of pressure to win that title against Volkanovski, who's significantly older than him, and obviously his chin started to go. So I feel pretty good about Diego Lopez going into this fight, but I understand Volk is a savvy veteran.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to kind of know what version of Volk you're going to get, right? Like coming off 2 straight losses, the longest layoff he's had in the UFC. So a lot of questions around him. But as far as Diego, I spoke with him on Friday ahead of this fight week, like pretty much exactly a week out from when he'd be weighing in and doing the face off and everything. And he's in a very good place, all things considered. So like, I like where his mindset is at, but I don't think this is like the do or die one for him as much as Volkanovski, just because I say like Diego Lopez lost his UFC debut less than 2 years ago, and then here he is fighting for the title.
But he earned it. He earned it, man.
If he couldn't get back in some fashion, I mean, that's hard for me, I guess, to discount given his age and everything. Right. So I do think it's there for him. It definitely feels like a lot more on Volkanovski that he needs to show us what's what here. But yeah, Diego, I mean, this is a great opportunity. A lot of arguments can be made that Movsar Evloev, the only person who's beat him in the UFC, should be in the spot, but he's there because he's made himself promotable. His fights are exciting. He's stepped up on all sorts of crazy opportunities at UFC 303 when Brian Ortega fell out. So he's done everything the right way. If he continues that, even with a loss here, I think he would be okay.
All right. Well, circling back to my original overreaction, Paddy's got the most pressure. Paddy's my ride or die in 2025. You know this, Mike. Paddy's my ride or die in 2025. He's going to finish this year in the top 5. This is the first win to get him there. He'll be fighting for the title next year. Okay. I'm sure we're going to talk about this again on the next edition of Overreaction Time. So we'll see how it goes, man. I know it's there. It's there. It's there. Okay. Let's continue on with a little bit more UFC 314, okay? Because this is a really great card from top to bottom, Mike. A lot of names, a lot of guys who have an opportunity to really make a name for themselves, not the least of which, of course, is the fact that Patricio Pitbull, coming over from Bellator, the former Bellator champion, he's going to fight Yair Rodriguez, all right? But, Mike, I'm going to hit you with this one, dude. The fighter most likely to steal the show at UFC 314 is Jean Silva.
Not an overreaction. I do think it's all there for him. I mean, you look at the like face-off videos and all that stuff, the press conference interaction from like over a month ago they did in Las Vegas. It's still getting traction behind it. Still people are interested in this fight, all those things. So yeah, I mean, like we know why. It's more so the Bryce Mitchell element. If he was fighting someone else, I don't know if you would say that just in like, unless he goes out there and gets like a KO of the year candidate, but him beating Bryce Mitchell in any way will be a huge talking point coming out of this event. So he's definitely poised for it. You know, a lot of people in the combat sports world are just like serving up this dude the alley-oop and hoping he can go out there and dunk it on Bryce Mitchell. And if he does, I think he'll get, you know, all the flowers and all the praise and all the push.
Hey, Bryce Mitchell was already the victim of one potential knockout of the year last year against, or 2 years ago, was against Josh Emmett.
Yeah,
it was already 2023. He was already the victim of one potential knockout of the year. Dude, Jean Silva is a freaking beast, man, in this division. And that dude has power. I mean, it is not out of the realm that he could send Bryce Mitchell into another realm on Saturday night.
Yeah. And I don't want to completely discount Bryce either, right? Like you got to, I guess when we're analyzing the actual fight now, you got to separate the human from the fighter. And, you know, he is an exceptional grappler. There is a lot of questions about Jean Silva's, you know, grappling defense, his takedown defense. He's obviously built like a powerhouse. I imagine he's not easy to just take down over and over, but who knows when he's on his back with someone like Bryce. Like, I'm not going to say this is insanely lopsided matchmaking. There is paths to victory for Bryce. So I do think like this, even all the stuff aside, like Jean Silva winning this fight, biggest win of his career, most validating win of his career. And, you know, he has to be regarded as a top 10 guy at featherweight after that. So outside of like the narratives, this is actually fighter versus fighter would be a meaningful win for Jean Silva in that way as well.
Yeah. All right. Real quick before we move on to other topics, is there another fight or fighters on this card? Is there somebody else? For me, it's Jean Silva. Obviously, you want to talk about Patricio? I mean, what do you think this means for him? How important is it for him to get a victory over Yair Rodriguez?
Oh, super important, man. I mean, we talked about this featherweight division. There's guys there in the race, and it feels like though it's set up very nicely for him. If he can go out and win this, maybe he gets that Michael Chandler path of one fight and you're in a title fight. And he had the little thing with Volkanovski at the press conference, bringing up like that old $1 million bet there. Him and Diego Lopez, obviously both Brazilian, so it could be a storyline there. And yeah, I think he's definitely in a good position. He just needs to go out and win, and I think he could get his title fight this year. So a lot of pressure on him as well. I mean, if we go back to the top of who's under the most pressure, he's got a lot on his back as well.
Okay, and then I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about one other fight that I find super intriguing on this card. I mean, there's a number of them, but the other one that stands out to me on the prelims, dude, is Chase Hooper against Jim Miller.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Chase Hooper against Jim Miller?
Interesting fight for sure. Like one of the bigger age discrepancies I think in UFC history. Around, I think Chase.
Have you done your research yet for the facts article, Mike? Do we know
he just set that last time against Clay Guida? I don't think it's as big of an age discrepancy.
Okay,
in this one, but it's close. So yeah, Jim Miller. I mean, I wonder about him as well. Like you listened to that interview he did recently with MMA Junkie Radio. I don't know if they just caught him on like a bad training day or he was tired, but like it felt like the 50 fight benchmark. This will be number 46 for him in the UFC. Like he seemed a little more indifferent on that than I've heard him being. So like, I wonder if this maybe could be Jim Miller's last fight. Again, maybe they just caught him on a weird day and his attitude will be completely different when we speak to him on media day on Wednesday. But yeah, that was something that intrigued me a little bit as well, is will Jim Miller actually get to 50 UFC fights? Because that's still 4 away, which given the tread on his tires, that's a lot.
That's a lot, dude. That's a lot. I mean, whatever Jim Miller wants to do, he can do, man. I support it 100%. It'd be great for him to get to 50, but if you're starting to feel something, with your health, don't push it, man. Just, that matters more than anything.
Agreed.
But yeah, dude, UFC 314, gonna be awesome, gonna be great. Was there something else you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, the one other person that I'm very interested to see is the return of Nikita Krylov against Dominic Reyes, and now the main card opener. I mean, Nikita's been on a nice little streak, 3 in a row, but we haven't seen him since March of 2023. So, like, he's a guy who's been in the UFC forever, extremely high finishing rate, and hopefully he can fight consistency and see if he can actually be something at light heavyweight here.
Yeah, lots of fighters who have an opportunity to make a statement or make a name for themselves. But just to circle it back, man, I'm looking forward to Jean Silva coming through against Bryce Mitchell. Fuck Bryce Mitchell. I mean, that was classic.
Probably get a taste of that again on Thursday.
I think we might, dude. If he knocks, we might get that after the fight. If he comes through with the win, especially if he comes through with the knockout, which would just be cold-blooded if he did that. But let's see how it plays out. All right, Mike, let's move away from UFC 314. Let's talk about a couple of news items, all right? A couple of things I want to talk about. One of them is really starting to worry me here, Mike, and that's what's happening with Islam Makhachev. Reports coming out last week, actually conversation with you and Henry Cejudo, right, where he talked about the fact that Khabib could be intervening and trying to put a stop to the idea of Islam fighting Ilia Topuria. Breaks my heart to hear that, dude. And then we're talking, and then there's reports out there that he may want to move up to 170 or at least wait to see what happens with Bilal and JDM, which, again, this is just breaking my heart, Mike. So I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this, dude. Islam Makhachev not fighting Ilia Topuria would be a big letdown and a UFC failure. I hit you with a 2-parter right there, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say the first part, not an overreaction. I think it would be a letdown. I'll say overreaction on the UFC failure just without knowing who to assign the blame on if it doesn't happen at this point, right? Like what's the true story here? Like you hear some side saying, like you said, the thing that Henry Cejudo reiterated, like Khabib maybe doesn't want this fight to happen for Islam because they don't see the upside in fighting another, featherweight, blah, blah, blah. That stuff's being, talked to death at this point. I understand it. You see the guys out there saying, Islam's only beat featherweights and short notice opponents, like blah, 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 using it to tear down his reign. Like what does beating Ilia get him in terms of like, his status at lightweight? Another guy who hasn't had any traction in the division. So I get it, but yeah, I don't know who would be at blame for this. I mean, we saw on Saturday the UFC Vegas 105 broadcast that graphic showed of Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira for Noche UFC. I think UFC came out and told Alex Buchanan that was an error, but we've seen errors pop up like this on broadcast before, and they end up being true. So I don't know what the plans are here. It feels less and less like Ilia versus Islam is going to be the next move, though. So I would be disappointed if that doesn't happen, because that's like,
Mike,
I do think one of the biggest fights the UFC can make, but I do think it would be even bigger if each guy had one more win.
Yeah, but that's a risk, dude. That's such a risk. It's a huge risk. I mean, Ilia Topuria's stock is at an all-time high right now. Like, I understand. I want to say too, I understand where Islam Makhachev and his team are coming from. I get it. The problem, though, is that this fight has too much support behind it now. It's got too much fan support behind it. It is a absolute super fight. It is one of the best fights the UFC could put on ever at the moment. And I don't think that's hyperbole either, given how dominant Islam has been and how hot Ilia is and how his star has just risen. And the UFC failure part of my overreaction here, Mike, is really, it stems from this to some degree. Like, we're in limbo with John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, another super fight that we really want to see. This one has grown so much between Ilia and Islam. We need to see one of them. And if you had told me before these reports started to come out in your conversation with Henry Cejudo, I would have thought we were more likely to see Ilia versus Islam. I really would have thought that. We can't end up with neither of them. I mean, like, dude, we're honest, and we are in that territory, are we not?
Yeah, I do feel like if we ended up getting
that's
Islam,
a failure on the UFC's part to not make that fight happen.
Versus Justin Gaethje or something, that would definitely feel like a disappointment. I agree with you there, but again, it's hard to know, like, without hearing from these guys. I've said from the beginning, I think if the UFC sends Islam Makhachev a contract with Ilia Topuria, like, he will sign it. You know, everyone talks about the quote at the PI and everything, like, fight anyone. He says, I'll fight anyone who makes 155. I think the UFC offers that fight, he will take it. But a question is, have they offered it? Is that the direction they want to go? Like, since Ilia
why wouldn't they want to go in that direction?
I have no idea, but you've heard Dana White be non-committal about Ilia Topuria's, like, what direction he's going to go from his lightweight debut. He didn't say from day one, like, we're moving up. You have Ilia saying they promised him the title shot. The thing that is interesting, though, is you brought it up from the beginning, like, if that element of Islam wanting to wait and see what happens in Jack Della Maddalena versus Bilal Muhammad, like, I get it. He's wanted to do the 2 title thing for a while now. If there's anyone who deserves that chance, like, him versus Jack Della Maddalena would be the weirdest champion versus champion fight since Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. Like, no one's asking for that. There's no heat behind it, but I know he wants that second belt. And then maybe he goes up and then Ilia fights Charles or Justin or Armin for a vacant or interim belt, and then he wins, Islam wins, he comes back down, and then maybe you have a super clean scenario where it's like a unification fight. I don't know, but there's a lot of moving parts here, and until we hear from Islam himself, like, either Khabib said, I can't do this fight for a different direction, I don't want to do this fight, we're all just kind of making assumptions here.
I should acknowledge as well, for our viewers, anybody who watched, coming out of UFC 311 earlier this year, I did say it was the perfect time for Islam to move up to 170. I did say that, but that was before this Ilia fight really got to a point where it seemed real. Sure. And you've heard me over and over again, Mike, that I've said it to you before. That's the absolute fight that I want to see. That is the one. Man, I mean, if you're telling me that it's going to be Islam versus Gaethje, or Islam's just going to wait and, you know, see what happens between Bilal and JDM. All right, well, if Bilal loses and we're just waiting until May, where does that leave us with Islam? If JDM wins and you're telling me that we're going to get Islam JDM as opposed to Islam Ilia, that's the letdown part of my overreaction here, right? That's a huge letdown. And we're just going to be waiting until when? October? Like, you know, because we know that's the timeline. If he doesn't fight in July at International Fight Week, we're going to have to wait until October again. The same damn timeline for Islam all the time seems to be February, October, and that's it. Like, it's just, I don't know, man. I'm distraught. I'm distraught right now, and it's gonna get worse.
Yeah, well, I think I would hope this week we'll find some answers, as Dana does media and things like that. I mean, I saw someone note that the past 2 years, the International Fight Week main events were announced April 6th and then April 12th.
Look how close we
So,
are. June
yeah,
28th
we're right in
is
that territory. It would be this week in theory. So maybe put your distraughtness and sit on your hands for a couple days, and maybe by next week you will be of clear and sound mind when it comes to this whole thing. We can only hope.
but my dream of the International Fight Week with 2 titles, it's not going to happen.
I wouldn't rule it out completely yet. Let's hope.
Okay. I'm going to pray for it, Mike. I'm going to pray for it. All right, dude. Let's move on. We got one last topic I want to talk about. And this is an opportunity for me to talk about this because we were off last week. All right.
Sure.
And that's the comments that Conor McGregor made last week about his future. He basically, in a nutshell, Mike, admitted that he's clearly prioritizing politics over his fighting career. And he said in that press conference, not this from this past weekend, but last week, he basically said he's happy with what he's done in the UFC. And the talk seemed to go towards, well, but I might fight in BKFC, which, is just odd, but it is what it is, man. I think I've said before on this show that, I'm confident that he's not going to fight again in the UFC. I'm just going to go on the record now and just say for sure, I guarantee he's not going to fight again in the UFC at this point. I mean, that's where I'm at, Mike. So with that in mind, let me just go ahead and hit you with this, Mike. Conor McGregor will go down as the biggest what if in UFC history.
Overreaction, because
instant overreaction from you.
Because to me, that person is still John Jones.
Despite
everything he has achieved and the greatness and being the GOAT, I look at John Jones and see
but
all
he's
those
already
years
labeled
off.
the GOAT by you and many others, though.
I know, but that's what makes it so insane. And you look at all that time off and all the fights he could have had and the what ifs and these things. And I think his legacy could be even sitting here being like, here's a slight thing about John Jones. Like it would be, I think, a different stratosphere if he had fought 5 more times in those inactive years. But nevertheless, I understand the approach you're coming with. Conor, I think a lot of people, it's so hard to say, like, where does the what if stem from? Like
the what if with Conor for me, I'll explain it to you here, stems from the fact that he reached the pinnacle and became the first to become a 2-division champion. And then we just never got to see him be active with any sort of regularity in MMA during his prime years.
So is the what if he had never fought Floyd Mayweather and just stayed
what
on
if
his
is what if
what if against whoever the next guy was at the time? Totally agree.
What if we saw a 2-division title reign with Conor McGregor? What if he actually went between featherweight and lightweight? And what would that have looked like during his prime years when I will admit Conor was at his absolute peak? He was insanely talented. He was a brilliant striker. He was knocking dudes out. He had power in the hands of somebody at featherweight that we really hadn't seen before, which clearly translated to lightweight in the what we saw against Eddie Alvarez. Yep. I mean, I'll always wonder what if with Conor McGregor. Like we did our countdown of the 30 greatest fighters of all time, and Conor was somewhere around 15 to 20, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what if he kept fighting and what if he continued to be dominant? He might be on that Mount Rushmore, but he doesn't belong in that Mount Rushmore. No. He absolutely does not. And that's where my what if is with Conor. Your John Jones what if is actually interesting, though.
Yeah, I mean the Conor one, I totally agree. Like, there's some fights out there I still think he would have done great in. I mean, it does feel like even if he had stayed and been active, that Khabib fight was a collision course, and I think even peak Conor probably still loses that one. I mean, maybe he's in a better
probably
knockout, but
at least there's no long layoff from MMA,
for sure. I think regardless, though, even he's active, not active, like that's where the party ended as far as like his time on the top. But that reign could have extended a little bit longer. He loses that, maybe an immediate rematch happen. Like who knows? There's still so many big fights they could have squeezed in around that time that would have been so big for the sport and big for him, and had us talking about him differently. But yeah, there's so many what ifs there with Conor. I mean, his it almost feels like you look at it now, like he maximized things in such a big way, but there's still so much left unsaid and undone there. And if he only continued fighting MMA, like you said, maybe he is one of those Mount Rushmore guys, but now he's just looked at as one of the biggest stars we've ever had, but not one of the greatest fighters we've ever had.
Yeah, I also think Conor, it seems, I think he may even like secretly like the what if aspect of his legacy.
Yeah.
Because you know, I don't think he wants to come back to the UFC. I think it's a risk. I think it's a risk if he were to come back to the UFC. I mean, even Chael Sonnen was saying recently that he would receive a quote ass whooping no matter who he fights in the welterweight or lightweight division, which at this point is probably true. So, you know, I mean, why even come back? You know, like why even come back?
I mean, it's a convenient, like easy thing to point to. My final fight, I broke my leg. Like I didn't really go out on a loss, this, that, and the other. So like, there's a lot of things I guess you can use to justify mentally. Like you were kind of forced out by injury as opposed to leaving on your own terms. But yeah, as far as him ever coming back, it feels less and less likely. But those 2 fights on his contract make it interesting. He really wants to do the BKFC thing. I thought one of the bigger interesting revelations was him saying he was offered the fight on Alcatraz, right? Like a boxing match, which makes you think at least someone at TKO was willing to let him do a boxing fight. That wasn't the case with the Logan Paul things. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe some people over there are coming to terms as well of like, hey, Conor's never going to fight in UFC again. Maybe we can get something out of him in some sort of fashion. So
yeah. Hey, again, what if? We'll never know. That's
the
story of Conor McGregor's career. We'll never know. What if?
Two division champion, never lost either belt inside the cage.
Never defended either.
Yeah, exactly. Never defended, but didn't lose them inside the cage. So it's a very weird career.
Yeah. All right, man. Mike, I appreciate you, dude, but the time for overreacting has come to an end. Thank you so much for being back on the show, man. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Of course, always. Yeah, it's always great to be here, and a lot of big ones to take into UFC 314 fight week. So we will see if my overreactions proved accurate or too much.
All right. Well, Mike is going to be in Miami this week, guys. So please be locked in to MMA Junkie this week. They'll be in Miami with Kamikaze and with Danny Segura covering UFC 314. And hey, guess what? There'll be some special stuff down the road that they're working on. So look out for that. All right. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, we will see you on Overreaction Time. Dana, take it away.
MMA Junkie AI.